Welcome to a special release of the Reality Escape Pod. Today, Peih-Gee and I are releasing one of our many Patreon-exclusive bonus episodes. And we're doing this in celebration of Recon Los Angeles, where we are right now. This episode features Michael Borys, the creator of the 49 boxes. We had a wonderful conversation with him, and he is now at Recon running the 49 boxes for everyone in attendance. So we figured we'd give everyone here a chance to get to know him better and listen to this bonus show.
In this episode, David and Michael talk about their pool hustling days. Yes, David was also a pool hustler.
Michael was a lot better than me.
And David tells a story on how not to be a jerk. We also talk about some of the inspiration behind the 49 boxes, and we explore incorporating magic into puzzles.
It's a really good conversation. We had a ton of fun making this, and we hope that you enjoy the show. Welcome to the Reality Escape Pod bonus show. Today, Peih-Gee and I are joined by episode guest Michael Borys. Hey, everybody.
Hello.
After we finish recording, David's like, I think this is going to be one of the strongest episodes we have ever recorded. And so I just want to let you know, though, Michael, that I feel like throughout a lot of the episode, you do this thing that I do, which is I constantly say that I'm Forrest Gumping my way through life. And I feel like you talked about that quite a bit. And while there is some truth to there being an element of luck and serendipity, but the truth is Forrest Gump worked hard. He was open to opportunity. He talked to everybody. He ran across the country 7 times, like meeting people and talking to people, and he never said no. People were like, can I join you? He was like, I guess. And if you read the book, he yes-ands every single opportunity he's presented with. This is how he ends up, for those of you who haven't read the book, he ends up going to the moon. Okay? I mean...
I did not know
Really?
that was... One, I did not know that there was a book, and 2, I did not know that was a part of it.
That's crazy.
I think it was originally a book, but he does even crazier things in the book. So I just want you to know that it sounds to me like you worked hard your whole life. You excelled at most of the opportunities you were given, but you yes-anded all the opportunities.
Thank you very much. I'll often talk about it as a crack. So if I ever teach, my thing is, as soon as you see a crack in the wall that you want to be in, if it happens, you've got that moment, like you just said. The yes and is the crack leap, right? And then widen that crack as much as possible until they don't want you there anymore. Yeah,
to be
that's great.
Truthful, that was the unspoken part of the Room Escape Artist origin story, was that when I played my first couple of games, and they were very early games, I saw that there was an opportunity, that this was something that people were going to care about, that this was something that was going to be important. And I was very conscious of the fact that there weren't going to be a lot of opportunities to kind of be first in something like this. I didn't expect so much of what followed. The timeline that I had in my head was way wrong. Things moved faster and more aggressively, and I would say that I don't think I took advantage of every opportunity that existed, but that was definitely a part of it, was seeing that there was this crack that light was shining through. And I was like, I want to move towards that light.
That's fantastic.
The other magical thing that kind of happened during this episode while we were recording is that every time David and I were like ready to switch subjects and jump into the next question, literally the next question that's on the list, the last thing you would say is you would mention something that had that topic in it. I was about to be like, I'm ready to move on to the Magic Castle. And you were like, well, you know, when I performed at the Magic Castle. And I was like, how is he doing this? Our last question, David had literally the last question was about pool. And you were like, you know, or such as when I was playing pool. And I was like, how is he doing this? It's literally the next question on the list.
Can I give a secret? Can I say how I think it's happening?
Yeah, please.
We talked about a lot of things, right? If you talk about a lot of things, you're going to hit every now and then. And bringing back to the 49 boxes, there is so much stuff in that show that inevitably there is somebody that comes up and says, my grandmother had that thing. Or the guy that gets the astronaut helmet in one of the episodes inevitably will be the astronaut. But eventually it's just going to happen. It's like in a room of 30 people, you're going to have 2 people who share the same birthday, right?
Yep.
Same thing.
It's funny though. The pool thing is interesting because this is something that has never come up on the show. It's something I almost never talk about, but I spent my high school years and college years playing a lot of pool. I never got anywhere near as good as you, Michael. My friend Jason, he had a pool table in his basement, and he and I were for years fixing people's computers all the time. And people would bring their computers over to us. This was late 90s, early 2000s, peak time for like computer virus stuff. And we would fix computers in his basement. And back then, a lot of that was reinstalling Windows. So much of the time was reinstalling Windows, which was just swapping in disks all the time and waiting for very long periods of time. And so we would just shoot pool while we did this. And we got very, I would say, aggressive. And the way that you were describing playing, just constantly playing for placement, was very much what we did. And we both enjoyed this. No one liked playing with us. Jason was also, some of our listeners have definitely met him. Not many. He's had a longstanding talent for being able to just very easily piss people off. And so there was a brief span of time where we would go and hang out at pool halls and hustle and play like we weren't especially talented. And he would do his thing where he would piss people off and get them to bet against us. Yeah, so we did a little bit of pool hustling. At some point, we started to realize that he was exceptionally good at pissing people off, and that was putting us in danger.
Yeah, it's an art, right? To stay alive.
Yeah.
When you're winning in those circumstances, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's fun. That's great. Yeah. I can see that. You're waiting for the installation to happen, but you've got time to play 3 games.
Yeah.
I get it. I totally get it.
Initially, we were just doing this because we were good with computers and people would ask us for help. In college, we decided that we were just going to start a business repairing people's computers. We figured we might as well get paid for this. And we had a deal that we would offer our customers that, like, if they just wanted us to reformat the computer, we would take the box home. And we had 6 different stations we had set up in his basement with monitors, keyboards, and mice and power cables and all of that. It would be a flat rate. We'd take it home overnight. We would hook up 3 or 4 computers at a time, get them all reformatting, and then just play pool all night while those things reformatted. And then the next day we would go and deliver them back and reset them up for everybody. But yeah, that was my high school and college years. Very much pool oriented. That
is great. I grew up in Detroit. I was born in 1969. My parents had, for the first 5 years of my life, a pool table in the living room. And my first 2 apartments had a pool table in the living room. It's great to hear someone else who loves pool that much too.
Love it. I haven't played in a meaningful way in a very long time.
Since 49 Boxes has existed, I haven't played. I just quit.
I noticed that a lot of the boxes were sitting on a pool table in your basement, which I guess brings me to the story that I promised to tell. I promised to tell a couple stories in the main episode. The way that you and I met was Tommy Houghton. Lisa and I were planning a trip to LA last year, and Tommy said, there's this person you should meet. And I have a rule with certain people. If certain people tell me that I need to know somebody, I always say yes. And one of those people is Tommy Houghton. Anytime Tommy has ever said, meet this person, the answer is, how do we make that happen? And Tommy had said, you should meet Michael. There's a chance he invites you to his home. If he does, just say yes.
And Michael had like no idea who were these people showing up at his house.
Yeah, Michael, yeah, I don't believe you had no clue who we were, if memory serves.
No idea. And there were a lot of you.
Yeah, there were a lot of us because this was the scouting trip for Recon LA. It was me and Lisa, it was Brandon and Teresa, and it was Kate Wastel.
And I wrangled an invitation because Tommy had also said, David's going to meet him. He's going to his house. He was like, you should try to go so you can check out what's in his basement. And I was like, this sounds like a trap, Tommy. Like, what? So like, go to this random guy's house so you can see what's in his basement. But sure enough, I show up also.
So we all show up. We got there before you, Michael. You were out somewhere. And so we were all hanging out by your front door, just hoping that we didn't get any negative attention from neighbors. It's just a gang of nerds.
Trying to evade the neighborhood watch.
And you show up and take us into this basement that you have that has all of these different boxes for 49 boxes and all of these different magical props and magical objects.
David keeps calling it a basement, but it feels like an emporium in the movies where you walk in, it's a little bit dark. There's like lighting, like a ray, like beams of light shining through. You can see the motes of dust dancing in the light, and it's just stuffed to the gills with boxes. And
it feels like the kind of place that we would go, like if we were on a quest and we were told we need this really specific magical object, and there's this wizard who has it, and you just got to go to his lab. That's how this place feels. And so we ended up spending quite a few hours going through the lock collection, and you have this collection of unusual and special decks of cards and all of this sculptural art that you have made or acquired or whatever. And it was just such a wonderful and unexpected experience to go and see all of these things.
I love sharing that stuff. Absolutely. And I love it when people get to come by. And you remember the Van Gogh head?
Oh, I do.
The immersive Van Gogh head. And the interesting thing is, in my opinion, the guy that designed this weird interactive sculpture that I have is the guy that started me on the path of doing whatever it is that I do, which is kind of an interesting thing, that Jim Palace character.
Tell me more about that.
I used to, look, growing up, I thought that all college professors were created equal. And boy, was I wrong. And I didn't know. That's true, right? It's true.
It's very true. A lesson that I learned from my dad at a young age is everything can be plotted on a curve.
There you go. Yeah, yeah. And this guy and his creative partner were way above anybody else, how wonderful their lessons were. But I think I kind of took it for granted because they were my first two major design instructors. But their instructors weren't necessarily about technique. It was about thinking big. It was about creating something that moves people long after you die. And what they were famous for was a project called the Four Corners Project. If you remember what that Four Corners Project was, it was these guys created a glass globe that was representing the Earth, and they painted perfectly 1-to-1 or 1-to, however, whatever the scale was, so that if they put a tetrahedron inside that sphere, they could rotate the tetrahedron and the sphere simultaneously and together and separately so that they can find 4 simultaneous points on the Earth where the points touched landmass, which is difficult because of all the water that we have on the Earth. And they found 4 spots, and it's very rare when you find that combination. One of them was in Easter Island, Irian Jaya, Greenland ice sheet, etc. And then they flew to those locations and planted tiny pyramids in those locations, those exact GPS locations, in such a way so that the theoretical sides would meet each other on the other sides of the globe, creating a giant tetrahedron in the Earth, building the biggest sculpture that man would ever make.
That's wild. I had not heard of that.
And they risked their lives to do that. And the lesson really, this was the first lesson by them, was whatever you do it on a massive scale if you can. And don't necessarily do it for money. And if you want money as an artist, marry a psychiatrist. And that's what he did. And so at any rate, his partner, and I'm getting to the Van Gogh head, by the way. So his creative partner winds up dying, David Barr, who's fantastic. And if you go to Detroit, you're seeing his artwork everywhere. You just don't know it. Any of the big giant artwork that is, because it's Detroit Motor City, it's the big O, right? There's an awful lot of cyclical work that you're going to see there, and it's all David Barr. It's huge. Anyway, so I was writing at Boing Boing at the time, and I was lamenting his death and what he meant to me. And about a year and a half later, 2 years later, Jim Palace contacts me, and he's like, I just read your article. Who the heck are you? And I said, well, you don't remember who I am, but because he also looked up my name and the work that I've done. He's like, you're an artist, but I don't know who you are. And I said, well, it was because of you that all this happened. And so we met. I went to his new home because he retired. He lived in Oregon at the time with his psychiatrist wife, and she was retired too. And he lived on and it's this beautiful place. And he was the last man standing of the Detroit art movement from that time period. And he had a lot of David's work and his own work, and he's in his 80s now. And we spent the day together, my wife, him, me, and his wife, and it was great. And we left each other in tears because of the stories that we shared. And we're like, we're probably never going to see each other again. And when I got home, I said, there's one particular interactive piece that you have that I find absolutely fascinating. And quick as you please, the guy had it created and sent to my home, and that's where it lives right now. And I'm going to describe it. I'm going to answer your question now that you asked. You weren't wanting the backstory, but that was the backstory of how that happened.
Thank you for that. That's incredible.
And here's the piece. It's a pedestal, and on it is a sculpture of Van Gogh's head. And it's painted in such a way so that it looks like Van Gogh's style, but it's in the round, right? And when you look at it by a print of one of the Van Gogh self-portraits where he's looking at you with his one good ear, it looks astoundingly similar, but it's meant to be looked at when you first see it as an angle of attack from that angle. But if you look at it from the backside is completely void of dimension, but it's paved with money. This is a commentary on the value of art, who controls the value of art, specifically at Sotheby's, that says, we're going to sell this piece over and over again, make more money than the artist made in his own lifetime on the piece, and keep making more and more money, and we're going to determine what that price is. Now, aside from all that, I mean, it's a nice concept, it's really nice, but there is a pile of pennies by the good ear of this Van Gogh sculpture. And if you take a penny and you put it in his ear, a penny for his thoughts, and you slide it in, it goes down a track, hits a trigger, and then you get one of hundreds of pontifications from artists throughout history saying meaningful things like, at the Feast of Ego, everyone goes away hungry. Or, if someone ever asks you how long it took you to make that piece of art, you tell them your age. Beautiful things like that. Now, you're going to get either the soothing voice of the artist through history, and I'm still hearing new ones that I've never heard before, or you're going to get a computer-modulated voice of a Sotheby's gallery operator talking behind the scenes about how they're either bilking people for their money, or they're controlling the market, or people are buying these things just to get to the front of the line for some social gala they don't even understand. It is a beautiful commentary where the sculpture talks out of both sides of his mouth from two different perspectives on how art is important to the world for different reasons. It is so meaningful, and again, I have the shivers thinking about it. And as a sculpture that lives in my house that belongs to a museum one day, and it will be in a museum, I think, it's just a beautiful, endless thing to talk about. And that's the thing that you were just asking me to explain, and I just did.
I love that thing so much. It's so creative and so fun, and I'm glad that you shared that story, because I had no way of knowing the depth of history that it had.
Yeah, and he's wonderful, and he's smart in this way. He could keep that piece in his house, but he's not going to be around forever, and he knows that it needs to live on, and this is the best way because I will show it and talk about it. And then his memory lives on, the art lives on, and even the artists that the voices are from live on forever, and that's the important thing. And I know that eventually I'm going to have to do the same thing, or the collection gets spread to the winds.
We're taking a moment to thank our upcoming sponsors for Season 8, Morty, Buzzshot, and COGS by Clockwork Dog.
We thank them for their ongoing support, and we are so excited for all of the things we're going to bring you in the fall with Season 8. Thanks again to our sponsors.
I used to wish every day for an app that does exactly what Morty does. It lets me track all of the escape rooms I've played, and I also use it to find games around me, including game reviews and open time slots. You can even find discount codes. And the best part, it's all free. It's got a great website experience, and it's also available on both iPhone and Android, so you'll never be without your Morty app.
I believe in Morty so much that I have a stake in it as an advisor, and I always enjoy the time that I get to spend giving the Morty team my input and suggestions. Start discovering and tracking your immersive outings today. You can learn more at morty.app/REPOD. That's REPOD to sign up and get a special badge for our listeners. We'd also like to thank longtime sponsor Buzzshot. Buzzshot is escape room software powering business growth, player marketing, and improving the customer experience. They offer an assortment of pre- and post-game features, including robust waiver management, branded team photos, and streamlined review management.
Streamline your marketing and grow your escape room business. REPOD listeners get an extended free trial and 20% off your first 3 months with no setup fees or hidden charges. Visit buzzshot.com/repod. That's REPOD to learn more. We'd also like to thank sponsor COGS. Are you looking to up your game when it comes to creating a more theatrical experience for your escape room or immersive show? COGS by Clockwork Dog is a software-hardware platform that makes it easy to create a show with lighting and sound cues, whether you're totally new to escape room tech or a seasoned engineer.
Get the COGS starter set for only $130 plus free shipping to the USA. This bundle is usually valued at $257. You can learn more and purchase your starter set at cogs.show. Use code REPOD at checkout. That's REPOD. And thank you so much to COGS by Clockwork Dog for their support.
Heartfelt thanks to sponsors Morty, Buzzshot, and COGS by Clockwork Dog. Our sponsors are making Season 8 possible. You can find links and details in the show notes. Supporting our sponsors supports this podcast.
I'm not going to call out exactly where this was or anyone who was involved, but I went to a gathering of mechanical puzzle, people who have some incredible mechanical puzzle collections. A lot of one-of-a-kind or very small run handmade wood or metalwork pieces. And they're all puzzles, but they're all works of art in their own right. And a friend of mine, someone I adore, was eulogizing basically somebody from that community who had passed away that year. It was a few years ago. And before he had finished, some of the people at this gathering started asking, what's his wife doing with his collection? Like vultures, just like they all just wanted to know how they could get a piece of it. And I can't think of very many points in my life where I've been as pissed off at people as I was in that moment. But yeah, it's something that really stuck with me and certainly changed the way that there were a whole bunch of people there where I'm like, I can't enjoy talking to you anymore.
That same thing happens with magic collections as well, where
I'm sure
a person spends their entire life doing the thing. And then when they're gone, the interest level was only with that person. And then all of a sudden it's, I don't know the value, I don't know the history, but let's just get rid of it. And then, like you said, the vultures come in and certain things. I might have said these very words when you came to my house. I was like, certain stuff here you only get. And it's so sad when a magician dies for that reason. And it's a really sad thing. And because you got this, and people don't see this right now, but I'm wringing my hands like an evil villain because it's like you're waiting for that to happen to get the thing that you need. And it's really a sad thing. It's really a sad thing.
Yeah.
So are a lot of these objects used in 49 boxes?
Heck to the yeah. So a lot of it is personal stuff that my parents might have given me, or stuff that friends might have given me, or magicians, or stuff that my wife and I just found whenever we travel for work or whatever. And stuff is built from the ground up. So yes, a lot of it is used. A lot of it's waiting for new projects to come up, which is why it seems, oh, that guy designs fast. No. I might have designed it before. Peih-Gee, can I mention this? Do you remember, and I'd rather not talk about this experience specifically, but do you remember the monkey bottle experience that I shared with you in the story, how that works? That was a mini.
Is it the pitcher?
No, this was remember it had the bottle with the note in it, and it had the playing cards and the coin. Remember
there are these wine bottles, these unique wine bottles that have this monkey sculpted into the glass of the bottle.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yes.
And it sort of had the ship of Theseus paradox whole baked into that thing. But my point is, that is its own 49 boxes chapter in its own unique way. So when you came to the house, there was one under the pool table and there was one around the pool table. So there were several stories sort of intermingling there. So I would say it's all there for those reasons. The answer is yes.
I guess the point I was really mostly trying to make is that when you come to 49 boxes, though, you will be handling some of these artifacts that are part of your collection, and some of them may be antique or really one of a kind. They're not just reproductions, things just made specifically for this game. You did the opposite, actually. You took existing objects and incorporated them into the show.
Precisely, yeah. And to collectors' dismay, sometimes things do break and then they have to be retired. And it might have been a 100-year-old artifact that someone can hold, but it doesn't do the thing that it was supposed to do. So the answer is yes. For sure, there's super old stuff for reals that exist in there. Yeah.
I mean, this is hard because I understand why you can't make this so commercially available, because God knows you can't trust the general public with some of these antique items. But that's part of what makes the whole experience feel so special, because I think you can feel the authenticity of the objects that you're handling.
I think you're right about that. To Disneyfy things, and what I mean is to have things droppable as like a theme park. If that were the challenge, we'd make it happen. But right now, I kind of like the specialness of this, where it feels like when I come up and I say, these things don't exist anywhere else, I think people really believe it, but they better believe it because it's true. But they believe it because I'm almost crying when I say it, because it's true. Yeah.
It's funny because even theme park designers don't fully understand the rigorous demands that are put on constructing escape room props. I've spoken to the people from the theme parks, and they don't fully understand it because everything in a theme park works in an obvious way and has a specific operator if it's really important. But if it doesn't, it's a wheel and it's just obvious. You spin that wheel, it's a lever, you just pull that lever. But in a mysterious environment where people don't have that instruction, they might look at that wheel and say, well, do I pull on it? Instead of, do I spin it the way that it looks like it's supposed to be spun?
You're absolutely right. And boy, that's what makes Lab Rat so good. Mm-hmm. That's what makes Stash House so good, because they've done such a good job of taking the complex and making it almost indestructible.
I agree with you.
Are you a big escape room fan, Michael?
I love it. I think I'm a horrible puzzle solver. I'm probably not the guy you want on the team. Like, people go, oh God, we've got Mike on our team.
You can play with us anytime.
Yeah. I love it. I really do love it. And what you said, David, if someone says, Michael, you need to go do this thing, whether it's Tommy or somebody else, and a lot of times it is Tommy because he's a genius who says, I need to see it, and he's right. Man, I love experiencing new things with people for sure.
There's some games I definitely want to make sure you get to see.
I was curious what inspired you to make 49 boxes kind of a puzzle-centric experience, because we talked about a lot of the other things, a lot of the other projects that you'd worked on. I didn't hear you really talking a lot about working with puzzles and puzzle hunts and things like, and escape rooms of that nature. And 49 boxes seems very puzzle-focused. So I was wondering what was the inspiration behind that?
I think I might have mentioned this idea that when I was with Alex and Susan and introduced to the MIT puzzle hunt, it's like it opened up a door in my head that didn't exist. And the big thing that I wanted, by the way, when I saw that, was accessibility, because I can't solve those puzzles. I can't do it, but I like the concept. I love the concept. And so when I first started working at 42 and falling in love with the sister idea of a puzzle where I solve something here, but I take that and it feeds into this puzzle, that really is what changed my life. And I wanted to deliver that feeling to people in the most amazing way possible, even if the system in which the answer is derived seems like a puzzle when really it was procedure. Because that can also feel great too, if the magical thing happens in your hand because of this impossible weirdness that happens where I've unlocked this and I've used a magnet here. I wanted to deliver that to people and then max out that dice roll if I'm a Dungeons and Dragons character. I have intelligence, I have dexterity, I have all these things. But if my new dice roll that I never knew existed as a die, if I was rolling zeros at first, if that existed, or one, I wanted to do it to a 20. And so I just wanted, that's exactly the answer. I just love it that much. And by the way, that number keeps raising, right? As new, whether it's a technology or new knowledge or new whatever the heck, So now it's just this massive die with more numbers that I can cut, right?
I mean, 100 dies exist. They do exist.
Yeah, but I want to max it out.
Lisa and I have a motto for ourselves, which is whole ass everything.
Good.
No half-ass
really
in
good.
here.
Yeah, I get it. I love it. And that goes back to the Jim Palace lesson, right? For the global pyramid thing that we talked about, right? That's certainly not, that is whole ass.
Yeah, no, that is.
Yeah.
For sure. Coming back around, because I mentioned we were talking about Mark Frauenfelder and Boing Boing, which like a bucket list item for me has always been to write for Boing Boing. And it's something that I've always wanted to do. So when I saw that you had done that, I was like, oh, that's incredible.
What? I've heard of it. I don't know that I've read stuff from it. What is it?
So Boing Boing is an early blog collaboratively created about all sorts of interesting stuff. It's very early internet. I would say that it's probably it's certainly in the top 100, probably even like a much lower number than that. One of the most influential websites on sculpting internet culture.
I was probably busy playing Neopets or something.
Probably. But I had met Mark in 2012. I was in the middle of, by a wide margin, the worst year of my life. And 2012 was rough for me. My longtime girlfriend at the time had broken up with me. My grandfather passed away. I got a concussion while I was cleaning out his apartment. And that's just the top 3 bad things that had happened to me that year. But I had a friend, still have a friend named Adriana Lucas, who was sort of a mentor for me early in my career. She was really big in the early quantified self movement, which was all about kind of measuring and trying to gather your own health data and make better decisions. This has since, I would say, and at the time, the seeds of this were very present, turned into a lot of really bad, stupid things ultimately emerged out of this movement. But in the early years, there was an innocence to it. And I went to this quantified self conference with Adriana in San Francisco. And I, as a general rule, hated most of the people that I had met there. But I got to meet a couple of people. Kevin Kelly, who was the founder of Wired Magazine. I was last year on his podcast. And I met Mark. And somehow I ended up sitting at a bar with him. We were just talking for a while. Just an absolutely lovely person. And I would have killed to write for Boing Boing, but I never would have asked, especially back then. But I remember telling him a story that seemed to really tickle him, which I've definitely not told on this show either, but I will tell that story. And that was when I was a kid. I was in the Boy Scouts and in the Cub Scouts. And for Cub Scouts, there was this, at least in the northeastern U.S., they used to do this Cub Scout Day to the battleship Massachusetts, which is a retired battleship. I think it's docked in Rhode Island. And there was this old Navy vet who would give kind of the history of the ship and also give the safety lecture. And the safety lecture, a lot of it was just basic logical stuff that you didn't really need to be told, but they need to tell you for insurance purposes. But there's this one thing that he mentioned that really stuck with me. And he's, when you're on a ship, Navy uniforms don't have pockets on the sides of the pants, because if you put your hands into those pockets, the ship is rocking, you won't be able to catch yourself if a wave hits and you fall. And so he says, while you're on this ship, even though we're docked, you never put your hands in your pockets. And he says, so if I see any of you walking around with a busted nose, I'm going to tell you that you're a jerk. Do you know why? And no one would answer, because he was kind of a scary old grizzled Navy guy. And he would say a jerk is somebody who was told not to do something and they did it anyway. So if your nose is busted in, I see this, I'm going to tell you you're a jerk. And he had this real gravelly voice. And since then, I very rarely walk around with my hands in my pockets, and I never do it if it's raining or icy or cold or the ground is even remotely unsteady, because I still, to this day, if I put my hands in my pockets, I hear this guy's voice in my head go, "You're a jerk."
You are programmed.
I don't remember why this came up, but
boing,
it did.
Boing and
yeah,
like boing boing, and that's so. Mark didn't say write an article. We're going to publish it.
No, and I certainly didn't ask. But
so when you're walking around in the freezing cold in the snow, you don't put your hands in your pockets.
Gloves?
You just have them in gloves and...
I mean, I live in a place that actually gets cold, so we have equipment for this. But the other thing that he said is that if you are on a vessel like this and your hands are cold, what you do is you put them under your arms. And that way, your hands are still available to catch you if you need them.
Clever.
Yes.
Very clever.
So anyway, don't be a jerk.
Don't be. I'll have your voice in my head. That's right. That's right.
So you had referenced the Brookledge Theater a couple of times, and you talked a little bit about it at the end, but can you tell us what the Brookledge Theater is?
Yes, I can do that. I'm going to do that without giving too much away. There was a magician creator in the early 1900s named Floyd G. Thayer. He was the greatest creator of handcrafted magic apparatus the world has ever known. And he had a magic shop in Pasadena, California. And he was friends with, when you went through my house, you saw posters, magic posters from the 1920s of Carter and Alexander and George and all these greats of magic at the time.
These are all of the posters. If you ever see posters of the golden age of magic, these hand-painted posters, these are all of the people who populate those posters.
And so if you do enough digging, you can see those dudes in Thayer's crazy magic shop in Pasadena, California. And when he was going to retire, he met the Larson family. It was the family that created the Magic Castle in Hollywood, California. And they traded houses, their Pasadena house and the Larchmont area house that the Larsons now live in. In the back of the Larsons' house, in this beautiful area, there is a theater. It's a vaudevillian theater that Thayer used to use as a show place for all of his magic tricks that he would give. And the magicians would come in and he would show off the trick and they would buy the ones that they want and not purchase the ones that they didn't want. But there would be vaudevillian shows that would happen there. Often, Orson Welles would hang out there. And this still happens to this day. You'll see Dick Van Dyke still be doing that. And the Penn and Tellers of the world take their 10 or 15 minutes on stage and like that. It's just a historical place that the Larsons wound up taking. And they kept it going until it wasn't big enough, which is why they started the Magic Castle in Hollywood in the first place. So it is an existing cool theater that you have to be tapped by the owner of the house just to even set foot into the property and into the theater, for sure. And we're very lucky that we did the show there a few times. The 49 boxes that we did it, I think 6 times. It was kind of cool.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to come on one of those occasions, but it's very special. It's small. It's unfortunately a private theater, so it's next to impossible to get an invite to an event there.
You can feel and smell the history, right, when you walk in there, for sure.
So there was one last thing that we mentioned in the main episode and promised that we would talk about in the bonus episode, and that was this video game that has been long forgotten, Enter the Matrix. It is cut from a similar cloth as the ARGs that 42 Entertainment was doing back in the 2000s. Enter the Matrix was a video game that was released in parallel with Matrix Reloaded, the second Matrix film. And it told basically the other side of the film. The Wachowskis were heavily involved in the plot and scripting and production of this video game. It is basically, if the Matrix Reloaded is a coin, it is the other side of the coin to the film. Only video game nerds of the era knew this. It tells the story of Jada Pinkett Smith's character, who is not a major character in the movie, but is the main character in this game. And they basically are telling parallel stories that kind of begin and end in the same places as the film. And it dramatically rounded out the story of the movie. They were meant to be consumed together. No one knew this. It just seemed like it was, I think, creatively really successful and also creatively kind of a flop, because I think that if you had played it, that movie was a lot better. And if you didn't play it and you didn't know that it was an option, the movie suffered for it, which was sort of an interesting thing. It's just a little bit of transmedia history.
I didn't know about this until today.
Yep.
And
very few people know about this. It's kind of remarkable. I think one of the unfortunate parts of this is that I don't believe the game will hold up if you were to get up. I'm guessing it would probably be on PlayStation. What was it on? Yeah, GameCube, PlayStation 2, Xbox. It was released on Windows as well. So it was a multi-platform release. So yeah, 2003, May 15th, 2003. But yeah, it's an interesting thing because to me, it feels largely forgotten. And so I share this with you today.
Being ahead of your time is not always good, is it? It's hard to get something newly adopted.
There's definitely a penalty for it. As Brett Jackson, who has said, who was also on the season, I think his episode is airing before this one. He's going to be running Imaginary Duels at Recon as well, as he, I believe, has so eloquently said, if an idea is even remotely original, you will have to ram it down people's throats.
It's funny. I love Brett. He's a funny and smart dude, so entertaining, and I can't wait to see what he's cooking up for sure. I love him.
Yeah, me too.
So before we close out, I kind of wanted to circle back to you talking about how being a magician, being a game designer is the same thing. I'm always interested when we have magicians that are into puzzles and escape rooms on, because I feel like there's really cool things from magic that puzzle and game designers could maybe learn from. So I was wondering if you had any tips, tricks, takeaways from magic that game designers could apply to their craft.
Well, there is so much self-working, and I'm using finger quotes where you can't see them right now, types of magic that could feed into puzzlery for sure. I think that's an easy, low barrier of entry to look into. Martin Gardner, I mean, you love Martin Gardner, right? There is so much work that guy has created that could help to at least influence or at least inspire a lot of infinite content, because that guy just worked and worked. And Sam Lloyd is another great. By the way, if you guys don't know who Sam Lloyd is, he was Martin Gardner's Martin Gardner, which is just so fantastic. So I would just suggest looking at that stuff, because always be reading, always be looking. And for that reason, you'll find that mathematics, magic, and puzzle are all the same darn thing.
You said a self-magic. What did you say? Self-creating magic or?
Self-working magic.
Self-working magic. What is that?
Yeah. Look, I'm not going to give away any, I'm not going to do any right now, but there are things that you can do with a deck of cards that are mathematical where miracles can happen. Now, if you have, let's say, not the ace of clubs in the 8th position and you do X number of moves and it's a word or a phrase or instructions in a game, there's just things that can be done with self-working magic that can get the person through a path in an interesting way.
It's basically like a mathematical proof turned into a magic trick, where if you do a thing a certain way, it will always turn out a certain way.
Oh, it's like those tricks where they're like, think of a number between 1 and 20, and then you divide it by 5 and you add 2 and you do all these things and you arrive at the same number or something.
Exactly that kind of thing. Or if you went to any magic performances during the pandemic, there was a lot of like, make sure you have a deck of cards when you log into Zoom to watch this show. And then they'd have you shuffle it, and then they'd have you do a whole bunch of things very specifically, and everyone would kind of make the magic happen at home. That's what this is.
Wow,
that's very well put, for sure. Yeah, so good, so good.
And for those who are wondering, if you're not familiar with Martin Gardner, everyone should be familiar with him. He was a mathematician, and I think he was also a writer. He wrote some kind of seminal mathematical puzzle books. I would say that escape room people and math are not always the bestest of friends, but there's a lot of depth to his work. And then annually there are these events called the Gathering for Gardner, which happens in cities all over the place. Take a look see if you can go to a Gathering for Gardner or an event run by the types of people who run those things. You'll probably find your type of nerd there.
I mean, I gotta say, I am not a fan of math in escape rooms or games, but when it feels magical in that way, I do like it. So if you're going to put math in your room, I feel like you should take a page out of that book.
And again, because magic and magical are the same, don't even limit yourself to just what you think is traditional magic or mathematics. It's just everything. Just keep your eyes open to everything, because anything is a platform just waiting to be bent to your will.
And I think that those are the closing words of the episode. Thank you to all of our patrons. Thank you for your support. Michael, thank you so much for joining us. This has just been a delight of a pair of episodes. And I can't wait to see you in LA this summer, hopefully before.
Same here. This has been an honor. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
And this is your reminder, once again, to get your recon tickets early. David, as we speak, is stressing. I can see sweat beating up on his forehead because nobody's buying tickets early enough. I need you to all collectively help me save this man from this stress and get your tickets early.
Some of you have. We've actually sold a good number of tickets, but I would like to sell all of them.
So we can stop stressing about it. And thank you to everybody who has bought them early. I absolutely cannot wait. I'm trying not to hype up 49 boxes too much, but I think it will be a real treat and something very different from anything that you've ever experienced before. And so once again, thank you to our listeners. Thank you, Michael, for coming on and sharing your wonderful stories with us.
It's been a pleasure.
If you enjoyed this episode, we've got a ton more bonus after shows in the archives for our Patreon backers. To listen to them, become a Patreon backer at patreon.com/roomescapeartist.
To get access to this, it's just $5 a month, and it gives you so much content. And also, it helps us so much. We are trying to grow the podcast. We're trying to grow the team. We're trying to grow a dream, and we can only do that with your help. Thanks for listening, and thanks for supporting.